Stuart James Scharnick, who is alleged to be an associate of Lieutenant General Shadrack Sibiya, has been in attendance for the past 2 days as Fadil Adams gives his testimony before the Madlanga Commission. However, during today's testimony, where he came into the public gallery and was actually seated right here in the corner, during the tea adjournment, he chose to go past the boundary of the public gallery and then enter into the media space, go past that area and head to the witness box over the red line. And when he returned, that is when he confronted a journalist and accused him of taking photos and placing it on a social media app. And that's when the alleged threat may have been communicated to the journalist, and subsequently Herman Malloy of the Sowetan went and opened that case of intimidation against Stuart Scharnick, and we do see that there was swift action by the police as the police were waiting outside the public entrance of the Madlanga Commission to give effect to that particular action that you saw live, where he was arrested and placed into the back of that vehicle and was taken off with the South African Police Services. So very swift action from the Madlanga Commission following a very disturbing incident where that journalist was allegedly intimidated by Stuart Scharnick on the sidelines of Fadil Adams' testimony.
Troubling scene indeed, Canny. But while we have you, I think it's worth also reflecting on the business of the day for the Commission's program, because Fadil Adams' appearance has now been postponed to tomorrow morning. At issue is the time that he needs to listen to a recording that's going to be very central to the leading of the rest of his testimony. Let's talk about what that recording, or at least what we know that recording deals with.
Well, that recording is the consultation with state advocate, or rather IDAC state advocate Jushanta Ramsamy, where she alleged that there was not much that could go forward with that particular matter. But he says that in that recording, Ramsamy had communicated to him that there were at least 2 cases that they could move on subsequently from that particular consultation. And that's quite critical because, at the very least, what we've heard so far with the IDAC evidence is that there was no prima facie case on the project diversion matters. And that leads us to the alleged sinister motive that could have followed these crime intelligence matters, or at least that's what the evidence is suggesting. And in order for him to properly interrogate this recording, he needs to be given an opportunity to listen to it in totality before he responds to it and actually gives the Commission his piece on the version of events. Currently, though, even with the recording that he disputes, there's still evidence that precedes the Section 27 referral affidavit that he struggled to explain, and that is the rush upon which that he chose to open those cases in the different areas, that is the Western Cape and the Gauteng being the Orlando SABC, and how he didn't even give an opportunity for the matters to be investigated as per that document that he said was slid under his door that was classified. And it started with a forklift issue, but he says that he opened a case on a number of issues relating to crime intelligence. But it's the timeline and the sequence of events that seems quite fishy in this regard, because he didn't give an opportunity for neither the Western Cape or the Gauteng province, that is the Orlando SABC, to investigate these matters. Instead, what you see is a scenario where it seems, or allegedly appears, that he's just covering his grounds to pave way for these cases to go off to IDAC for a Section 27 referral, because it cannot be argued that you would have had 24 hours and then that was enough time for you to know that your dockets were intercepted or that the matters were not going to be investigated because you were dealing with a complaint against high-ranking generals. It is that complication and the haste and the specific choice of certain police stations, particularly in the Gauteng province of Orlando SABC, coupled with the fact that Witness G has given testimony here, stating that he told Adams to go to the Orlando SABC. That's already suspicious, because Witness G is the so-called handler of Brown Mokgotsi, who has shown a pattern of having an MO of trying to allegedly build cases against these high-ranking generals, namely Lieutenant General Dumisani Khumalo and Top Cop General Fani Masemola, and allegedly also trying to go after the PKTT with the hopes of getting to the formers that have stated before that. So that is certainly a lot of evidence that he is set to get through tomorrow when he returns with the commission at 9:30 a.m. And the whole task here is about finding out whether the events that precede the Section 27 referral point to a person that was making a legitimate complaint, or does it point to an individual that was allegedly part of this alleged orchestrated attack on those high-ranking generals within the South African Police Services.
And just lastly, Canny, at some point, Fadil Adams was basically scolded for referencing whenever he couldn't explain his actions, deferring basically to information that he claims he received from, let's say, a good friend who was in the police service, the now late retired head of the anti-gang unit in Cape Town.
Yes, absolutely, Tembegile. It becomes difficult to rely on a source that actually cannot corroborate your information before the probe. And it's almost a bit kind of sinister if you think about it, because the only person that he can turn to in terms of the source of information, particularly with the interception of dockets, because that is the reason he claims that he was going to different police stations across the country and then eventually turned to the minister, and then that's how it becomes a Section 27 referral. He states that he got information about the interception of dockets from this particular source. But what is difficult about this source is that this person is now late, which makes it difficult to reconcile the events that are already quite suspicious on their own in terms of the haste and the rush in which he does this particular sequence of events. And it raises questions about the true alleged intention, or whether or not he's being truthful about this particular element where he says that he heard about the interception of those dockets, and that's why he didn't trust the South African Police Services in this regard, and that's why he turned to the minister for some form of an intervention. At this particular point, I don't think he was able to convince the commission about this quite bizarre sequence of events or order of events that you see, that in a very short time, he doesn't even give the investigations a chance to take shape in the criminal justice system. He just files this, or rather lays or opens this case, and within 24 hours he's on to the next step. And within 24 hours he's already emailing the minister. Well, upon which timeline was the South African Police Services or the investigators supposed to interrogate these dockets if within 24 hours he was already moving to each step that leads up to the Section 27 referral affidavit? And this all feeds into the allegation that this was allegedly part of this alleged orchestrated attack on these high-ranking generals, that they needed someone to lay the foundation to pave the way for these cases to then make it to IDAC. And we already see what the evidence is suggesting about project diversion in that particular regard. We'll see whether or not he'll be able to dispute the evidence given by Drew Ramsamy tomorrow 9:30 a.m. when he returns, or whether or not what Ramsamy stated under oath in that recording is in fact the truth, that there was nothing in that particular statement or consultation, let's put it that way, that took the matter forward. We have Fadil Adams stating on one side that she told him, allegedly, that she could move on two matters, and he says it's in the recording. We'll find out tomorrow rather at 9:30 a.m. whether that is indeed the case, as Fadil Adams is set to continue with his testimony. It's over to you in studio.
Canny, I was quite struck, a final one from me, I promise this time, quite struck by the fact, and this was pointed out by one of the commissioners, that even though Fadil Adams said he was in such a rush to see these suspicions around his dockets being stolen, intercepted, whatever word you want to use, when he reached out to the now minister who's on leave, Senzo Mchunu, who then basically followed up through his channels, which led to Adams getting a call from a police officer assigned to look into the complaint. It was Adams, in fact, who avoided all conversation and attempts at meeting with that particular officer to indeed deal with the suspicions that these dockets had either been stolen or intercepted.
And that precisely speaks to the point as to why he didn't allow the process to play out. Why was there such a rush to move to each step in order to ensure that allegedly these matters head over to IDAC? And that's why there's an overall question surrounding his particular conduct and whether or not you can conclude that this was allegedly all well coordinated and well planned. Because if there was an intention to investigate this forklift matter, the question is, why didn't he give SAPS the opportunity to do so? Why was there such a haste to move from each step and then eventually abuse your powers and proximity allegedly to get the minister to intervene intervene in these matters. Why was it so important to do it in this particular manner? And that is what we expect the evidence leaders to get to the bottom of at 9:30 a.m. tomorrow when he continues.
Canny Maphanga, SABC News senior reporter at the Madlanga Commission of Inquiry. Thank you, Canny. We're at 2:30. Let me quickly remind you of the breaking news story on SABC News this afternoon. We're following the arrest of Stuart Scharnick, an associate of Fadil Adams, a witness at the Madlanga Commission this week. Scharnick has been arrested this afternoon after he allegedly intimidated a journalist. It's to do with what he claims was this particular journalist taking his photo to be posted online. He'd gone all the way up close to the witness box where he spoke to Fadil Adams, and then on his way back, either out of the venue because it was during the tea adjournment or back to his seat, we're not too clear, he then stops. We'll show you the visuals in a moment of that moment if we can. He then stops and you see, even without audio, that confrontation play out where the two men exchange words and ultimately the commission security then steps in, and then finally you see Stuart Scharnick walk away from the Sowetan journalist Herman Moloi. That has now landed Scharnick in police custody, being arrested. The commission spokesperson Jeremy Michaels telling us this afternoon that it is a place where there's important work to be done and they want to do that safely and with dignity. These are the visuals I was referencing earlier. There's Scharnick in the suit with a water bottle. He stops, points a finger at the journalist, and this is what we saw. And ultimately, one of these security guards you'll see in a moment will then intervene and lead Scharnick away.